AM2R, another Metroid 2 remake, is a 2016 retelling of the 1991 title Metroid 2 Return of Samus created by DoctorM64. Carrying updated sprite work, a refined sense of exploration, and numerous other quality of life improvements, it's no surprise that this fan game has seamlessly worked its way into the hearts of the Metroid community as an exceptional adventure. I'm no exception to AM2R's charm, given the general ambiance and investigative world design mesmerized me throughout each of SR388's divided environments. Despite bringing over the flawed boss structure that originally damaged Metroid 2's gameplay progression, AM2R brightly shines in various other categories, presenting itself as both a beautiful game and a groundbreaking experience. Landing on planet SR388, a single characteristic of this game should be immediately apparent. AM2R's art direction is best described as vibrant, breathing life into the likes of its many lush, intricately detailed locations, and I found that the sprite work here was amazingly handled. Whether it's the faint shades of blue that engulf the screen as Samus submerged underwater, gorgeous foggy green hues providing soul to the surrounding botany, slight reddish tints seen in caverns bearing extreme heat, or the more isolated darker areas that have their eerie atmosphere captured by black vignette lighting, AM2R is the most dazzling Metroid game I've played, aesthetically speaking. These gorgeous graphics even extend to backdrops which, although obviously not capable of being interacted with, provide the game's universe with perceptible layers that builds on the depth of the planet's inner structures. As I annihilated the monstrous denizens of SR388, I couldn't help but reflect on how picture-perfect the game's luminosity was. In Chozo-made sectors such as the Tower or Golden Temple, it's reasonably bright but never blinding, and within the deeper crevices of the planet, is just dark enough to communicate the uneasy feeling associated with being unaware of what lurks around you. Outstanding animation encapsulates the entire experience, as AM2R's heavy concentration of bosses have their sprites manipulated in ways that inject the vigor these threats need to feel threatening. Movement from bioforms such as Omega Metroids contains a level of fluidity that clearly displays each and every frame of animation as they contract, preparing to lunge at you. It might seem like I'm grasping at straws, but I am not exaggerating when I say that the motion expressed through these animations are fantastic. It contributes volumes to worldly immersion when beauty coming from the visual integrity are presented as smoothly as they are. Conventional Metroids promote a sizable package of interconnected exploration spanning a diverse set of biomes with light platforming and destroying monsters sprinkled all throughout. Blockades occupy different corners of the world, calling for you to obtain the appropriate ability, such as Morph Ball bombs for blowing up tiles or Screw Attack for driving Samus through ceilings. Quite frankly, it's amusing returning to previously inaccessible areas with the right equipment and processing how much of a dangerous bounty hunter I truly am. Usually backtracking in video games comes off as a device that creates annoyances via padding runtime, but in 2D Metroid I almost never have issues with it because of the various power-ups accrued that fit into Samus's kit. Similar to Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, retreading ground ends up being enjoyable when you have tools that grant you increased mobility or the strength needed to trivialize enemy interactions. For example, on the first round exploring, I'm forced to scuffle with the myriad of monsters in a given room, but on the way back, I might have the space jump which allows me to maneuver around them, Screw Attack which demolishes them, or beams that phase through walls or encase them in ice. See, I support backtracking in 2D Metroid because it's a design choice meant to engage the player with the various assets of their arsenal while adding structural richness to the world, something further expanded upon via secret passageways and other discoverable rooms that offer varied paths taking you from point A to point B. AM2R's progression system is formulaic. When the concentration of Metroids are wiped out in a given area, lava that initially prevented access to the planet's inner layers descend, granting you passage. The journey's linear development was something I adored because it kept the exploration open yet focused, which meant I had the leeway to venture off in search of the Metroids without fear of getting overwhelmed or lost in expansive layouts like Super Metroid for example. Streamlined gameplay isn't equally appreciated by everyone, and that's perfectly fine, and I get that, but I found that the variety in AM2R's universe gave the hunt a powerful charm rooted in how SR388's zones are interestingly attached to one another. AM2R expresses itself through its enriching setting. Golden Temple's array of Chozo architecture, reverent statues, and overgrowing thorny vines on the outskirts establish environmental evidence regarding the civilization that thrived prior to the campaign's events. The industrial complex is overrun by its mechanical bestiary and conveyor belts, completed by circuitry seen in the backgrounds. Or take Hydro Station, its blueprint filled with pipes alongside a drainage system that manipulates water flow. Intriguing ideas surface very often, each housing appreciated enemy diversity and fresh mechanics, both of which being elaborated upon by the menu's data logs. These give us the optional context needed to understand SR388's arrangement beyond the surface level, and I found that it fantastically adds to the world building, whether it's retrospective information, a research team member's last words prior to death, or the biological analysis of the game's surplus of creatures. All in all, the passion that went into AM2R's physical features left a sizable impact on me, and I still find myself mulling over the lore of both its naturalistic and industrial territories as I wait in anticipation for Metroid Dread scheduled for release this October. A pair of entertaining and sadly questionable design choices are those of which construct AM2R's cluster of boss fights. The ones such as Torizo and Arachnus were fairly challenging, founded on multiple phases, understandable yet reactionary attack patterns, and just enough space for you to dance around, and although I think that an adversary like the Tester leans too far into a more frantic bullet hell style of gameplay, I relished in what the general boss design expected of me in terms of execution. What concerns me, however, lies in the repetitive boss structure from the Metroids, hazardous life forms serving as the force that provoked your quest to exterminate said residing organisms. 4 variants of evolutionary stages are to be annihilated in increasing order, being Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, and Omega. But the problem is that you engage each form on numerous occasions, way more than I'm comfortable with. In no universe should I be dueling against the exact same boss upwards of 10 times, and if you're going to do that, arrange their attack cycles and properties in ways that differently engage me. Virgil in DMC3 is the quintessential example of how to handle this notion, because although he is one person fought 3 times, there are additional pieces added to his kit within each confrontation like Devil Trigger, more tightly timed dimension slashes or projectiles, and boxing options that keep subsequent fights interesting. The variation in AM2R is rooted in the level design rather than the actual Metroids, which means the difficulty scaling is never consistent. On one hand, an easier time is spent in a straightforward corridor of reasonable space to work with, while on the other hand, you might get screwed over by a narrow vertical tower or meager platforms with damaging hazards below. Rather than the game presenting you with compelling methods of counterbalancing what should have been fresh boss design, you're fighting the environment more than you're fighting the enemy, and it's genuinely infuriating. The Nest is the laziest iteration of this layout diversity, as there are 3 Omega Metroids in this biome fought in identical rooms structure-wise, meaning there is quite literally 0 variation within each of these battles that are fought extremely close to one another, which isn't good at all. This isn't even mentioning how pitifully easy these encounters were designed to be, with the interstices in the corner that guarantee damage evasion with little to no effort. Alpha and Gamma Metroids telegraph their main actions, but when they aren't attacking, they're approaching from the most erratic directions, awkwardly bouncing off walls and ramming into the floor as if they lack a brain, which is an annoyance because there's no sense of pattern recognition to be derived through these random movements. What further exacerbates meetings against Alphas and Gammas is how concealed their vulnerable spots are. Missiles ricocheting off them because I was a pixel off is as bizarre as it is frustrating, especially factoring in their strange flight patterns and appendages that block their weaknesses. Additionally, I have a huge issue with their general HP yields because these are monsters combated tens of times that are still drawing breath after being intimately associated with God knows how many super missiles, and if you run out of said weapon, gear up for a 5-minute Zeta or Omega Metroid fight. They just don't know when to drop dead, and I seriously can't even imagine the flat modifiers applied to them in the harder difficulty. Other gripes I have include the space jump feeling wonky at times, which is an issue I have with all Metroid games that utilize this feature, and you can attribute that to my lack of skill if you really want to, and frame drops that become apparent when many textures clog the screen, but aside from that the gameplay was solid. However, I'd assume that performance varies depending on your PC specs. Given what I've delineated, it's clear that despite AM2R's ad nauseum Metroid hunt serving as the major critical blemish on an otherwise remarkable game, this project was a dedicated attempt to recreate a fragment of Nintendo's history. We see this in the delightful sprite work, incredible attention to detail in bringing the game to life, environmental world building, challenging bosses, well-paced exploration, beautifully remixed music, and a plethora of welcome additions levied upon the 2D Metroid framework like interchangeable HUD, aiming, or optional hints. The gameplay as demonstrated here is sweet, demonstrating a level of polish that made for a truly satisfying adventure that I severely enjoyed, even going so far as to rank it above some of the official games. No different from most other 2D Metroids, this fangame's ambiance sucked me right into its world, captivating me through its phenomenal set pieces as my weapon arsenal expanded over the course of the adventure, empowering me as the player. AM2R might have been an expedition that took 4 hours of playtime to complete, but there is an abundance of worldly substance encompassed within that short frame. I truly believe that if you find yourself checking the boxes on being a Metroid fan and having a functional computer, AM2R is something you've just gotta sink some time into. Thank you for watching and have a great day. See ya.